Steve McQueen versus Bruce Lee. The 5 words on the photo that started a war. When Bruce Lee called Steve McQueen to brag about his biggest box office triumph, he expected congratulations. 3 days later, he received a photo in the mail. The 5 words written on it dragged 2 legends into a war that lasted years. Fall of 1973. While Hong Kong's film industry was going crazy over Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, 8,000 miles away, Hollywood's coldest star Steve McQueen was planning his own silent war. Both men came from different continents, but they wanted the same thing, to be the world's one and undisputed action king. Bruce Lee had grown up in Hong Kong's narrow streets, a warrior with insane discipline and a desperate need to prove himself. From age 13, he'd been fighting in underground matches, learning that respect came only through dominance. Steve McQueen had grown up bouncing between foster homes, a rebel who hated authority and never saw anyone as superior. Both came from the streets, both earned everything the hard way. Both carried scars that made them unable to accept defeat. By 1973, Bruce Lee had exploded in the heart of Hollywood, like a controlled detonation. Enter the Dragon wasn't just a movie, it was an invasion plan executed with military precision. An actor from Asia was systematically destroying white action heroes, one by one, and the numbers proved it. But nobody knew how Lee's aggressive success was creating a storm of rage in the heart of Hollywood's most prideful star. While Steve McQueen was working on the editing of The Getaway, he faced Bruce Lee's image every day in the studio office. Newspaper headlines, magazine covers, news bulletins, even billboard advertisements. That Chinese man's face was everywhere. Kung Fu explosion, the new action king, Eastern invasion. These headlines created Arctic coldness in McQueen's blue eyes. Each morning brought fresh coverage of Lee's triumph, and each evening, McQueen went home with those images burned into his memory. McQueen was only 43, but by Hollywood standards he wasn't young anymore. Studio executives were already whispering about the next generation. Bullet, The Great Escape, The Magnificent Seven. He had built his empire with blood, sweat, and by crushing rivals without mercy. Now some unknown foreigner was coming for his throne. When he went to his manager's luxury office that Tuesday morning, things got even worse. The agent was enthusiastically spreading contracts across his mahogany desk. Bruce Lee's new projects, bigger budgets than anything McQueen had ever received. Studio executives were openly marketing Lee as the future Steve McQueen. The future Steve McQueen. McQueen's jaw tightened like stone. Nobody could replace him. He was the first and only Steve McQueen, and he wasn't a man who would tolerate disrespect. But what happened that afternoon wouldn't be the kind of attack anyone expected. Bruce Lee sat on the terrace of his Hong Kong house, studying the numbers from Enter the Dragon's American release. The box office figures shattered even his wildest dreams. His film was outperforming established American action stars in their own territory. He was now the biggest action star not just in Asia, but in the world. And it was time to prove it to the man whose throne he was claiming. With the adrenaline rush of victory coursing through his veins, he picked up the phone and dialed Steve McQueen's private line. When the phone rang, McQueen was fixing his motorcycle at his Santa Barbara ranch, the California sun beating down on his shoulders. He picked up with oily hands, his voice carrying cold curiosity. "Steve McQueen. Mr. McQueen, this is Bruce Lee." Lee's voice carried the intoxication of victory and youthful arrogance. "I wanted to tell you personally, my movie is breaking all your box office records. In Asia, in Europe, and now in America too. The numbers don't lie, Mr. McQueen. I think it's official now. I'm a bigger star than you." The silence that followed was like the moment before an explosion. McQueen's controlled breathing flowed through the phone line, each exhale measured and deliberate. Lee had no idea he had just declared war on the most dangerous man in Hollywood. Before hanging up, McQueen only said, "We'll see about that, kid." Arctic coldness, the kind of chill that comes before a blizzard. Lee hung up and smiled, completely misreading the situation. He thought he had heard McQueen's helplessness. What he'd actually heard was something far more dangerous, the sound of a predator planning his next move. But Lee didn't know that Steve McQueen was a man who never forgot, and especially never forgave being humiliated by someone he considered beneath him. 3 days later, Bruce Lee received an unexpected delivery. The package arrived by special courier, elegantly wrapped in black paper with silver ribbon. Inside was a professional studio photo of Steve McQueen, black and white, cinematic lighting, perfect composition. The signature of Hollywood's King of Cool was at the bottom. Lee initially thought this was a gentlemanly gesture. Maybe McQueen was accepting the truth and offering his respect. Perhaps this was how professionals handled transitions of power in Hollywood, until he looked closely at the photo. To Bruce, my biggest fan. These 5 words froze the smile on Lee's face like a slap across the jaw. My biggest fan. Fan, fanatic, admirer. McQueen wasn't seeing him as an equal rival, wasn't acknowledging him as a peer or even as a worthy opponent. He was dismissing him as just an admiring child looking up at his betters. At that moment, Lee realized this was a declaration of war disguised as a gift. The crew working at Bruce Lee's Hong Kong studio immediately noticed the change. Lee's muscles had tensioned like coiled springs, the lines on his jaw more pronounced, his usually calm demeanor shifted into something darker. His fingers trembled as he held that photo, not with excitement, but with pure concentrated rage. Biggest fan echoed repeatedly in Lee's mind like a broken record. McQueen had belittled him with surgical precision, humiliated him with the calculated cruelty that came from years of experience in destroying rivals. Lee couldn't sleep that night. He paced his house like a caged tiger, his mind racing. Only those 5 words kept spinning in his head, each repetition adding fuel to a fire already burning out of control. But what was truly shocking was the intensity of what came next. The next morning, Bruce Lee began working his contact list, a who's who of Hollywood. He organized a whisper campaign against McQueen that was both sophisticated and brutal. Steve McQueen doesn't do real stunts. He always uses doubles for the dangerous work, Lee would say in carefully orchestrated conversations. Those famous car chases are choreographed with professional drivers. I never use stunt doubles. Everything you see is real combat. Such statements circulated in film circles, like wildfire. Lee wasn't just attacking McQueen's reputation, he was systematically deconstructing the mythology that had made McQueen famous. Lee also organized his own photo shoot, sparing no expense. Same serious pose, same professional lighting, but the message was far more aggressive. He sent the photo to McQueen by express cargo. What was written on the back was a declaration that the war had officially begun. To Steve, who will always be second. The gloves were now thrown down. The war between 2 legends had officially started. When Steve McQueen received that photo, he said nothing for hours. But what he did was far more effective than any angry outburst. He hung the photo in his office, where everyone could see it. Agents, producers, directors. And beneath it, he added his own handwritten note in red ink. Never again. That note became his mission statement. McQueen's revenge was cold and calculated, executed with the precision of a military operation. In the following months, strange things began happening in Hollywood that seemed unconnected, but formed a clear pattern. Projects featuring Bruce Lee's name constantly had mysterious budget problems. McQueen's agents submitted carefully crafted legal objections to Lee's projects, each technically valid, but clearly designed to create delays. None were directly in McQueen's name, but his fingerprints were everywhere. When Lee's name came up in studio meetings, there were constant questions. Is Steve McQueen available for this project? The subtext was clear to everyone. McQueen or Lee? Not both. Bruce Lee was quick to notice this systematic sabotage. But understanding it and stopping it were 2 different things. McQueen's invisible hand was felt everywhere. Lee's new projects were mysteriously delayed. Financing would suddenly evaporate, and promising deals would collapse at the last minute. But Lee wasn't a man who would stay silent. Lee's counterattack was more ruthless and personal than anything McQueen had done. Every time he came to America, he would systematically invade McQueen's territory. His private hangout spots, his exclusive gyms, even attending McQueen's motor races while publicly critiquing his performance. And everywhere he went, he introduced himself as the real deal. At Hollywood elite parties, Lee began undermining McQueen's reputation with subtle psychological warfare, approaching McQueen's close friends with devastating questions designed to plant seeds of doubt. Steve's famous stunt work. It's interesting that I never use doubles. Real fighters don't need body doubles. Isn't McQueen's acting range somewhat limited? I'm the first actor to successfully combine martial arts with serious dramatic acting. Steve represents the old school, all style, limited substance. I represent the new generation. When these comments reached McQueen's ears through the Hollywood gossip network, his reaction was immediate and vicious. McQueen activated his own network with military efficiency. Anonymous safety concern reports began being sent to insurance companies for every one of Lee's film projects, claiming Lee's fighting scenes created massive liability. Negative articles began appearing in industry trade magazines, so expertly written they seemed like objective journalism rather than character assassination. By 1974, this war had reached almost surreal proportions. Both men began refusing to appear on the same magazine covers, even when it meant turning down lucrative deals. At award ceremonies, they completely ignored each other, creating an atmosphere so tense that other celebrities began taking sides. Organizers began inviting only one of them to industry events. Lee was going crazy with rage and frustration, his famous discipline cracking under constant pressure. Every day brought McQueen's new sabotage.
His energy was draining from the constant fighting, and his health was beginning to suffer. This war was consuming him from the inside like a slow-acting poison. On July 20, 1973, Bruce Lee died in Hong Kong at just 32 years old, his body failing him at the height of his fame and power. When the news reached Hollywood, McQueen was sitting alone reviewing contracts. He said nothing for a long time. He just stared out the window at the Los Angeles skyline. Then he did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out the Bruce Lee photo, the one that said second. He studied Lee's face with new eyes. "Arrange a private jet to Seattle," he told his assistant quietly. "Today." The assistant was surprised. In all his years working for McQueen, he had never known the star to attend funerals. "May I ask why?" McQueen was quiet for a moment. "I have a funeral to attend. July 25th to Seattle, Lakeview Cemetery. Bruce Lee's funeral ceremony." Hundreds of mourners lined the streets, and among them, wearing a simple black suit and dark sunglasses, was Steve McQueen. Nobody expected him to come. McQueen was famous for avoiding funerals. He hadn't even gone to Sharon Tate's funeral, despite being close friends with her. But Bruce Lee was different. At the ceremony, Steve McQueen became a pallbearer, alongside James Coburn, Chuck Norris, and Lee's family members. He carried Bruce Lee's coffin on his shoulder, his face a mask of controlled emotion that few had ever seen before. The mourners were shocked into silence. During the ceremony, there were tears in McQueen's eyes, real tears that he made no effort to hide. When press extended microphones toward him afterward, he only said in a quiet voice, "I cared about Bruce. I felt like I needed to say goodbye to a friend." "Friend?" asked a reporter, confused. "But weren't you rivals?" After a long pause, McQueen looked directly into the camera. "That's a long story, and it's not the story that matters today." At the end of the funeral, pallbearers traditionally left their white gloves on the coffin as a final tribute. McQueen's glove also remained with Bruce Lee, a silent acknowledgement of respect that came too late. But the most revealing part was what was discovered in Bruce Lee's personal belongings after his death. Among the items carefully preserved in his Hong Kong house were multiple Steve McQueen photographs. That first biggest fan photo was still framed and preserved in a place of honor. Alongside it were other promotional photos from McQueen's career, and even ticket stubs from McQueen's racing events. Bruce Lee had secretly respected and admired Steve McQueen all along. Even in the middle of their war, Lee had been collecting mementos of the man he saw as his greatest rival and inspiration. When McQueen died in 1980, multiple photographs of Bruce Lee were found in his personal collection too. Next to the photo that said second, there was McQueen's handwritten edition in faded ink. "Great fighter, greater man, wish we could have talked." Those 5 words, "my biggest fan," didn't just hurt two men's egos. They dragged two legends into an unnecessary war that consumed years of their lives. But even in the face of death, true respect emerged from the wreckage. Because sometimes the greatest rivalries arise from the greatest respect, and sometimes we wait until it's too late to show that respect to the people who matter most. Was this war really necessary, or was it just wounded pride and industry manipulation? Could McQueen and Lee have actually been friends if they'd just talked honestly from the start? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed stories that reveal the hidden truths behind Hollywood legends, subscribe for more. This story is a fictional narrative inspired by real legends.